and thank you so much for joining one of our weekly ExxonMobil focused webinars here at the Retirement Group. I'm Samantha, and I will be your moderator today. In just a second, we're going to be joined by Wesley Boudreau, one of our senior financial advisors. Wesley is going to speak on discovering the tax advantages of an NUA strategy for ExxonMobil employees. And if you stick around after his presentation, he'll also be answering some questions. So I encourage you to stick around and pop open that Q&A box if you'd like. You can ask away. Throughout his presentation, I will also be putting some very valuable resources into that chat box. So also feel free to pop that open. I would try not to bombard you with too many things, but there will be some very useful links. One of which will be the link to book an appointment with Wesley or one of his colleagues if you wish after this presentation has ended. And before we begin, I'd like to just quickly remind you that we are not affiliated with ExxonMobil. The Retirement Group is a completely independent group of financial advisors, so please keep that in mind as you're listening along. And without further ado, here is Wesley Boudreau.
All right, thank you for that introduction, Samantha. And like she said, we're going to be talking about NUA, which is Net Unrealized Appreciation today. I'll also give you a quick update on the interest rates, and we just got those out, so we know what they're going to be for the third quarter of 2024. And ultimately, any questions on this, it gets a little bit more into the weeds on a personal situation. So it's really good to give us a call to go through your specific NUA possibilities, which a lot of individuals we work with at ExxonMobil still have those options. Now, with the change in tax codes and things like that, we'll give you an example that's been updated. The difference is not as lucrative or as big as what it used to be, but it's still definitely something to review. So first, what is NUA? Again, it's Net Unrealized Appreciation. This is primarily just the ability to pay ordinary income on your cost basis of company stock, Exxon stock. And on the growth of that, you can actually pay long-term capital gains rates, which historically and currently has always been better than what your ordinary income is. So I'll give you an example, but generally speaking, what happens is if you just didn't know what NUA was and you said, okay, I want to start taking withdrawals from my Exxon 401k plan, or I want to roll it over to an IRA and take withdrawals, the most of your money in there probably was pre-tax. You may have put some after-tax cost base in there, but for the bulk of you, it's going to be pre-tax money, which means once you start taking that out, it's going to be taxed fully at whatever your tax bracket is for that specific year. Whether that be now, whether it be 10, 15 years down the road, we don't know where tax brackets will be. So it could be much higher, obviously, with all the spending we've been doing across the country. But what's going to happen is if you exercise NUA, you can say, okay, well, I want to pay my ordinary income tax now on just what I paid for that stock. And then that cost, the difference in that cost basis and the growth, which is my long-term capital gains, I will pay long-term capital gains rates, which right now are lower than where they are on ordinary income. So in some cases, it could save 7% or more on what your specific tax bracket would be immediately. And if we fast forward and let that roll over and let that actually defer and grow, the tax benefits or savings could be even greater. And another aspect is if you say, hey, I want to hold on to this Exxon stock or a portion of it and just leave that to my kids or my wife, then that's a situation where it could get a step up in cost basis. And that's how the rules work now. But again, they could change those in the future. So I think the best way to look at this is jumping into an example. So first, let's kind of take a look at Lucy Norton in this case. This is an example we've used for quite some time. The only thing we're changing here are the tax codes and the tax brackets. But Lucy, in this case, let's assume that she's got a cost base of about $50,000 of ExxonMobil, and it has grown to $200,000. So what happens is she's got a value right now of $200,000. If she didn't know what NUA was and she just started taking withdrawals from that or rolled it to an IRA, that full $200,000 would be taxable. But if she exercises NUA, she'll pay taxes now on that cost basis of $50,000, and that growth of $150,000, she won't pay tax on that until she sells the stock in the future. It could be a day away or it could be 10 years away. So in this example, we're going to show what it means to defer that out for another 10 years, and let's assume that it doubles, hopefully, in this case. Another quick thing to remember I didn't kind of touch on before is there's different triggering events for NUA. The primary triggering events are going to be at age 59 and a half and separation of service. There's also death and disability. We obviously don't want that to be a situation, but really for ExxonMobil it's 59 and a half and separation of service, but Exxon doesn't really let you take a 59 and a half withdrawal. So primarily once you separate services when you can exercise NUA, and depending upon how old you are, you may have one option to do that, or you may have two options to do that as well. We can get into that if anybody has one-on-one questions of it. So jumping back to Lucy in this situation, again, that left-hand side, the right-hand side is going to be the example we gave with her actually just deferring this, keeping it in the Voya 401k plan or rolling over to an IRA and eventually taking that, not 200,000, but that 200 grew to 400, if we recall. in the example. And let's assume she just goes ahead and takes that out. Now, in reality, this is kind of a case in a vacuum. She probably would not take the full 400,000 out all at one point. She may take it out over the course of some years. But if she took it out all at one point, she could bump up into some of the higher tax brackets. In this case, she'd be getting up into that 32% tax bracket, because what happens is you're paying taxes on a gradual basis, the 10, 12, 22, 24, and 32%. Now, this again is assuming those tax brackets are the same in 10 years, which unfortunately they probably will not be. So again, that's why I say this is kind of in a vacuum situation. On the flip side, if she were to exercise NUA, if we see on that left-hand column, she would be actually paying ordinary income tax on that cost basis, that 50,000. And then the growth will be that long-term capital gains that she would pay whenever she sells that stock. So in this example, assuming she waits 10 years to sell that stock. But there's also the growth of that 200 to the 400. So that extra 200,000 in growth, that's long-term capital gains on that as well if she sold it. But going back to the other aspect I mentioned is, let's say if she never sold it and she passed away, then that specific extra 200,000 of growth could potentially be tax-free to beneficiaries if they continue to keep the step up in cost basis provision in the tax code over the next 10, 20, 30, 40 years, however long Lucy lives in this situation. So let's look at some actual real numbers here. And again, I'm not going to dig into the weeds a whole bunch here because we don't need to get into the full tax code. But we ran this example assuming that Lucy was married, filing joint. So for 2024, she's going to actually have a standard deduction of about $29,200. That's going to be able to be taken off the top. So by looking at that on the left-hand side, the NUA strategy, she's only going to be, if this is her only source of income for the year, which may not be the case, obviously, she's only paying about $2,080 on that $50,000 for exercising NUA. And then fast forward, if the tax codes have not changed and she's going in there and actually selling the stock and paying tax on the long-term capital gains, she's paying another $38,355 there. So for total, she's paying about $40,435 if she were exercising NUA in this vacuum example again. And now, if she were actually waiting and taking distributions and pulling out that full 400,000, the difference would be about $75,000 is what she'd be paying there. So the overall difference, about 34,000, between $34,000 and $35,000 of potential savings in NUA. Now, again, this is all a future example. Another quick example would be taking a look at Lucy again and saying, let's say she just wanted to roll it over now, take it out versus exercise NUA immediately. The simplest way to look at it would be that $150,000 of long-term capital gains. Instead of paying her ordinary income tax bracket, that may be, let's say, 22%, she would be paying 15% on that for the long-term capital gains. So in this case, she's saving about 7% on that $150,000, so a little bit over $10,000. That's really kind of a high-level way to look at it. But like I said, and when we get into the one-on-one examples, the benefit of Voya and ExxonMobil is they give you the line-by-line cost basis on your 401k statement. So we can go in there. You may have, $500,000 or $1 million worth of stock, but you may only look to exercise it on $200,000 or $300,000 because that's your lower cost basis, for example. So again, just give me a call. We can kind of run through that, provide a real NUA calculation, show you what the benefit is. But also keep in mind that process gets a little convoluted. You have to transfer the shares over to computer shares. It takes a while before they can get those back over to your own brokerage account. So you are somewhat locked into the ExxonMobil stock for a couple of weeks in some cases. So if the NUA is not sizable, a lot of individuals, even though we run the numbers and say, hey, you can save a couple $1,000s here, you could easily see that fluctuation in the value of the stock as well. So it's important to look at all this side by side. Let's jump into some interest rates here. So that's what a lot of people are kind of concerned about outside the NUA. That's on your 401k. The other question is, what am I going to do with my pension? What are the options if I want to take that lump sum instead of the single life annuity or joint survivor or period certain annuity? So they use interest rates in order to calculate that out and in order to calculate the net present value. And those are updated every quarter. We're coming off the last couple of years. We had some of the lowest interest rates in the history thanks to the pandemic. So we had some of the highest lump sums, and the flip side has happened where those interest rates on that pendulum have kind of swung a lot higher now, and it's dropped those lump sums. Good news is we have seen a gradual decline in interest rates for this calculation over the last few quarters. So that is helping you out. And hopefully we'll see come summer if Fed starts to drop rates, that may lead this lower. By no means would I expect them to get back down to where they were during the pandemic levels, but obviously factor in you've worked a couple more years and those interest rates are coming down a bit, that lump sum may start to look attractive again. But it's really important to run this in a cash flow analysis and look at the options side by side, which we can help you out with. But taking a quick zoom in on this so The March rates came out just recently, so that gives us the ability to calculate out the third quarter. So that first bold line you have in there, Q3, we're looking at 4.98, 5.21, 5.37, and 4% for the grandfather rates. If you look at the Q1 in that middle section, the second segment, it was 5.59. Now it's down to 5.21, so a little bit less than about 40 basis point change. So again, what are these rates? The first, second, and third segments are going to correlate to years of retirement. The first is going to cover your first 5 years retirement, second, years 6 through 20, and the third, years 21 and beyond. And if you've been around for a long time and at Exxon, you may be grandfathered onto the GAT rate, which is 4%, gives you a larger lump sum. We can run through these with you one-on-one. But generally speaking, if we see an interest rate change, about 1% is going to equate to anywhere from an 8 to a 12% change in your lump sum. So let's just say 1% equals 10%, for example. This drop by about 40 basis points means you're probably seeing about a 4% increase in your lump sum from first quarter to third quarter. So for most of you, if you're on the fence of pulling that trigger and you're thinking about taking a lump sum, we're at a kind of a wait and see point. These are dropping each quarter, so kind of wait and see whether it makes sense to pull the trigger in the third quarter or fourth quarter gets better, and we'll go from there. But any questions you have on this, give me a call. We can run through those, help you model the actual pension plan and show you how, if rates change, how it affects you. But the best way to do all this is running that cash flow analysis we've talked about time in and time out. Right now, about 3/4 of Americans over 50 don't have a written plan. If you can spend about 10 to 15 minutes with us, just gathering some data, different information like the 401k balance, pension estimate, we can run a social security estimate. The biggest culprit is how much do you think you need to spend in retirement? If you need help on that, we can work with you on a budget as well. But by putting all that together, give us about a week to run a really detailed financial analysis. We can get you a cash flow analysis and financial plan that shows you, are you on the right track? Should you make any changes? Should you increase your savings for the last couple of years? Would you need to decrease your spending in retirement? Could you retire earlier, or do you need to work later? We can go through all those different options and also view side by side the annuity versus lump sum, so you can see how they play out over the next 20, 30, 40 years instead of just how they look right now. So again, if there's anything to take us up on, it's that cash flow analysis. So again, kind of jumping back into who the retirement group is, in case you have not been on one of these webinars or haven't sat down with myself or one of our other advisors. Excuse me. The retirement group is an independent financial advisory firm that focuses on working with corporate employees and helping them achieve, a great retirement strategy. We've worked with a lot of companies for close to 30 years. ExxonMobil for a large chunk of that. But what that does, it gives myself and some of the other ExxonMobil focused advisors a better understanding of your specific plans. We tend to allow our advisors to focus on maybe 4 to 6 different companies, so they're dedicated to those companies. So if you have any questions on the benefits, whether it be the 401k, the pension, healthcare retiree medical benefits, life insurance continuation, group policies, things like that, we can go through all that with you. We do have offices throughout the country, so rest assured, if you need to sit down with somebody face to face, we can likely accommodate that. But obviously, this day and age, it's very easy to do web meetings, phone calls, email, whatever your preferred communication is. Just let us know. And then, like I said before, that cash flow analysis, take us up on that if you have not done one. If it's been over a year, go ahead and let's update that, because we've obviously seen changes in both the market and interest rates and how that could affect those numbers as well. We'll see if we have any questions here soon, but before I jump into there's a QR code if you want to get into my calendar, one of the other advisors' calendars, to set up some time to talk one-on-one. You can also reach that 800-900-5867, or you can email us any questions or the request to schedule an appointment at info@theretirementgroup.com. So with that, let's see, do we have any questions, Samantha? I know I kind of went through that quickly.
No, it was great. Thanks, Wesley. Yeah, we're just going to answer a couple. We'll try to keep it short. This first one, how does the NUA strategy affect my RMD or required minimum distribution eligibility?
Okay. Well, it's actually, it's kind of the opposite. The RMD is going to potentially affect that NUA eligibility,
Okay.
because like I said before, I didn't get into the nuances of it, but essentially, NUA, you have one time to exercise that. That's post 59.5 and or after you retire. So let's assume maybe somebody has worked a really long time and they retire from Exxon at 68, and they're in great shape. Maybe they took the pension as annuity, so they don't need to tap into that 401k. And we fast forward, they haven't touched it, and then all of a sudden RMD kicks in. Once you take a withdrawal, if you want to exercise NUA, you have to take the full account and do that by the end of that year. So in this case, let's say somebody turns 73 and they're forced to take out, $10,000 for RMD. That starts that window where if they do want to exercise NUA, they need to do it by the end of that year. If they don't, it's gone forever. On the flip side, if you were to exercise NUA prior to RMD age, that also means you need to close out that account and roll the rest over to an IRA. So it could affect your RMD in the aspect of it's allowing you to get some more money out of that 401k and get it in that taxable account. So it grows in a different manner, and it reduces your potential RMD down the road. So this is more in lines with what we're typically working with Exxon folks. It's a combination of maybe exercising NUA to reduce that that IRA amount that's going to be taxed at RMD, and then also looking at Roth conversion strategies between retirement and RMD age.
All righty, thank you. This next one's a little long. When I turned 59 and a half years old, I took an in-service distribution of some of my account balance. I'm still working. Does taking an early distribution mean I can't use the net unrealized appreciation tax approach and receive a lump sum payout that includes the employer stock?
Okay. This it kind of goes into what I was starting to answer before about the trigger events. So the trigger event 59 and a half and separation of service. So if you let's say you retired at 60, you've passed both those triggering events. You're older than 59 and a half and you've hit that triggering event. So if you want to exercise NUA, it's the next thing you'll have to do. Now, if you took a withdrawal, around 59 and a half, and it may have been with ExxonMobil, it may have been after tax withdrawal or something like that you took, that's going to be you're past that triggering event, but you're still working. So your next triggering event would be when you retire. So I'll make up your age. Let's say you're 65 now and you retire. Now you have the ability to exercise NUA once you retire, but not before. You can't exercise it before retirement in this case with ExxonMobil. So you've retired at 65 in this example I'm making up, and now you can exercise NUA if you want to. As far as a lump sum, I think you said something about a lump sum. That may be the confusion around if you exercise NUA. It doesn't mean you have to do all of your stock, but if you do any of it, you have to roll over the rest. So let's go back to Lucy as an example. She may have had $1 million in Exxon stock, but only maybe 200,000 was her low cost basis she wanted to focus on. So if she exercised that NUA, and let's assume that she just exercised on 200, that remaining 800,000 of her balance would have to roll over to an IRA by the end of that year. So it all has to be done within that year. So hopefully that gives a little bit of framework, but that sounds like a question that might be, give us a call. We can dig into your exact numbers as well.
Thank you, Wesley. And yes, as a reminder, the link for the cash flow analysis that Wesley has been mentioning throughout the presentation is in the chat. So you can click on that and get started on your cash flow analysis. Last one, Wesley. I have corporate stock in my 401k and I'm retiring this year. Can I roll just the stock into an IRA account and still use NUA?
Okay, so if you're rolling the stock in, if you're rolling all the stock into an IRA account, then you're not doing NUA. You're rolling it over and you're going to take a withdrawal somewhere down the road. And it also may be a point where you may, let's say somebody at ExxonMobil has traded the stock over time. You may not have low cost basis, so NUA might be a moot point. And it also could come into the fact we run the calculations and the tax savings is so little, it's kind of a moot point as well. But if you're moving that money, the stock out of the account into an IRA, there's no NUA capability in an IRA. It's only in the 401k, if that's what the question is. Again, generally, we're going to look at it. And if you exercise NUA in a portion of it, then the rest of that stock can be rolled over to an IRA and grow tax deferred. But once it hits an IRA, there's no more NUA. That's only in the 401k.
All righty, Wesley, that was it. Anything else you wanted to add before we go?
No, just a quick reminder, myself personally, a lot of the other retirement group advisors have worked extensively with ExxonMobil. So if you want to dig into these numbers, give us a call. We not endorsed by Exxon, not employed by them, but I will also give a quick caveat. I've been on the phone a lot of times with Voya walking through NUA examples. The process is a little bit tedious, and a lot of times you need to make sure that you understand what you're talking about in that process. So even if you're not working with us, you have NUA questions, give us a call. We can kind of hold your hand or be on that line with you and make sure you get the right information through Voya.
Definitely. Thank you, Wesley. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. We hope to see you on another webinar very soon. Have a good day.